Hello, everyone. What I like to do in terms of the study questions is rather than respond individually to each submitted set of study questions from each student, which would be quite a bit, what I like to do is to just look over the study questions and describe what I had in mind and what sort of answers I was looking for. I should say, especially that this first week, that the thing is very open ended. Asks for interpretations of each one. I think that there's definitely a kind of right area to be in terms of interpretations. But I don't think that really there are wrong answers per se to these questions. Now, as we move forward and begin reading different sorts of things and beginning reading them in a different way, a less open ended way, I think that looking at these videos where I review the study questions should be helpful. I do it after the week is over, so I don't do it in time to write your essay, but considering that there will be a final exam for the course, I think it's good to look over these, to look at these videos in which I review the study questions. So I will be doing this every week. Let's just take a brief look at this week's study questions, and they are very open-ended. Arya's fencing master in the Game of Thrones clip has a certain view of death. How would you describe it? Well, of course, that is open-ended, but it's quite clear that from what he says, that he considers death to either be literally or figuratively a god. And in fact, he says there's only one God, and his name is death. Which as I've described in the video for the module, I find it a very interesting view of death as having something that has the ultimate power over us. That is, that if we're thinking of forces in the universe with which we have to contend, which is part of theology, right? It's part of the notion of God. This notion that death is a kind of God makes a certain amount of sense. That is, if we think about ultimately what has to be faced as the most prominent aspect of our human condition is death, is our mortality. And I'm not saying that death is a god. I wouldn't go so far as to characterize it that way, but I think that it certainly makes sense, especially within this fictional world. And it makes sense as a way of viewing death. Now, is it the right way to view it? Is it the best way to view it? Is it even a good way to view it? I don't know. If we skip ahead to number 3, explain why Donne's poem is a Christian view of death. Well, the view of death as a god, as a powerful god that has ultimate control over us in the Game of Thrones clip, and Donne's Christian view of death couldn't be more different. It couldn't be more incompatible. Donne's poem is a Christian view of death because he believes in eternal life. He believes that death only appears to be mighty and dreadful. That the whole poem is saying that death has no power over us, that death is something to be despised. Death is something weak and slavish, as he says. And that is only because he believes in the resurrection. One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. That is the essential Christian message about death, that Christ is the victor over death. Death is a kind of an enemy that Christ has defeated. And this only makes sense if there is actually a promise of eternal life, a promise of the resurrection. Number 2, how would you describe the characterization of human death in Ecclesiastes? Do you agree with it? Why or why not? Well, Ecclesiastes, if you haven't read it before, is quite, especially for a Christian, I believe, or a Jewish person reading the Old Testament as their holy book. It is quite something, I think, especially for the Christian, because there's so much of an emphasis in Christianity on the afterlife, because that's sort of theory of salvation. And here we have a book of the Bible which almost explicitly denies that, or at least is very open about its skepticism about that. That is that the very striking comparison with humans and animals, and the way they die is really, it couldn't be any more different from the standard Christian message that most of us get. But there it is in the Old Testament, the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, but that is a part of the received tradition of Christianity as well as the New Testament. So it is very striking. I think that were to if we were to extrapolate on that little portion of Ecclesiastes, what it says about death, death is the end. Death is, it's not that there is no God. It's not, Ecclesiastes is very clear about believing in God, but the notion that a human life in some sort of open-ended, infinite way extends beyond death it seems to me very foreign from the message of Ecclesiastes. And so it does call into question the very meaning of human existence. That's why the repeated phrase, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, is sprinkled throughout Ecclesiastes, calling into question the meaning of human life, if it is finite, as seems to be suggested. So, yeah, this is just what I was thinking when I asked these questions. Again, I don't grade them, but considering that it's part of the class, I've asked the questions and I do not give individual feedback for study question submissions. I like to do these videos, to explain what I was thinking when I wrote the question and what sort of answer I was looking for. As we move forward, it is up to you, and let me be very explicit about that. It is up to you to compare your own answers with what I've said in this video and future videos. That is, this is why I'm providing the video. And again, it doesn't really apply that much this week, but in further weeks, if your own answer was way off what I'm talking about, then you should clarify the question for yourself. And that's what these videos are for. And feel free to contact me for an individual discussion about the question or your answer to the question or any matter, for that matter, concerning the course.